3.
Good morning. I'm Judy Costello, Managing Director of BioHealth Innovation, a public-private nonprofit located in the BioHealth Capital Region, whose mission is to help grow the region's biohealth industry cluster by providing support to commercialization support to early-stage biohealth technology companies and promoting the industry and our individual company successes. I'm very happy to have the opportunity to moderate this panel today, focused on advancing your biohealth technologies through non-dilutive funding. The BioHealth Capital Region is comprised of Maryland, DC, and Virginia, and we are fortunate today to have companies who have advanced their technologies who are located in Maryland and Virginia, as well as two supporters of the ecosystem who are able to help companies access non-dilutive funding and other commercialization resources. We don't have a lot of time, so I will save the introductions to all our speakers, but you will be able to find their bios and their email contact information and more information about their companies on the Resi Digital Program Guide and on the section on the Digital Resi website that's related to this panel. We're going to have an interesting conversation today, but first, let's get to know a little bit about our speakers. I'd like to introduce to you first Amir from Baltimore. He's with Spinalign. Amir.
Hi everyone, I'm Amir Sultanizadeh from Spinalign. I'm the CEO and co-founder. Should I do a full intro?
Spinalign is?
All right, so Spinalign began about 3.5, 4 years ago with discussions with spine surgeons at Johns Hopkins Hospital and really looking at what are the major limitations in what they can do during surgery. And the main topic that came up is feedback during surgery about how the correction of the spine is occurring. And so they would go into surgery and essentially not know if they have to go back tomorrow. And the main reason is the current imaging technologies that are out there, there's not enough feedback to tell them how the surgery is going. So we developed a 3D real-time system that provides alignment measurements of the spine in under 30 seconds and with 80% less X-ray imaging.
Great. And Crystal, can you tell us, you're our Commonwealth of Virginia representative, tell us a little bit about your company.
Yes, good morning everyone. I'm Crystal Eisenhower. I'm the CEO for Aperiomics, and we are focused on advancing infection testing because there are serious issues with people living with chronic infection for sometimes decades. So we are able to identify every known bacterium, virus, parasite, and fungus from whatever sample we're working for, so that the healthcare provider understands the complete picture of what may be going on in something such as a chronic urinary tract infection, so that they can help that patient actually get better instead of living with a chronic infection for decades of their life.
Thank you. And Anthony, you're representing two companies here today, both of which have received non-dilutive funding.
Yeah, thank you, Judy. So my name is Anthony Saleh. I'm co-founder and CEO of Miracule. Before joining Miracule in partnership with BioHealth Innovation, I helped found a subsidiary of a Dutch company, Mimetis. I'll focus, just to keep it short, on Miracule. Miracule came out of a collaboration between our company and the National Institutes of Health to develop a platform to identify RNA therapeutic targets. We're focused on RNA therapeutics because RNA therapeutics allow us to directly target genetic changes that underlie patients' disease. And the platform we've developed allows us to identify a target that links up with an underlying genetic change in patients, then develop a small RNA therapeutic that specifically corrects that change for patients that have that genetic modification. We also have a delivery platform that uses antibodies to get those RNA therapeutics to the correct tissue. When we founded the company, it was just myself, my two co-founders, Ashlyn and Rob, and we were able to utilize dilutive funding and partnership with the government to get the company up and running as part of our strategy. And then we've been able to match that with dilutive funding from investors as we made progress. And I'll be excited to tell you about our story and our journey to becoming a successful independent company.
That's great. And I'm excited that we have a good breadth with diagnostics, therapeutics, and medical device. That was just those technologies that were just mentioned by our CEOs. So supporting that type of technology from Maryland, there's a novel program that helps with early stage companies pulling technologies out of the universities. And Artie, would you like to talk a little bit about that here in Maryland in the BioHealth Capital Region, please?
Sure. Good morning, everybody. My name is Artie Sensitive. I run a program called the Maryland Innovation Initiative that's housed under an organization called TEDCO. TEDCO as an organization is set up to innovate, invest in, and grow technology-based startup companies. And the Maryland Innovation Initiative under the TEDCO umbrella is specifically directed to de-risk technologies with our partner universities. And by partner universities, I mean Johns Hopkins and the University System of Maryland, and one HBCU of Morgan State that's resident in Maryland. We de-risk those technologies and we help spin out companies that we then invest in. So at TEDCO, we do both non-dilutive and dilutive funding. And we leverage our non-dilutive funding to get to dilutive funding and investments from our various portfolio funds.
Great. And last but not least is one of our colleagues at BioHealth Innovation, Rini.
Thank you, Judy. Hi, I'm Rini Peck. I'm an analyst with BioHealth Innovation, and I lead the analyst team right now. So BioHealth Innovation is a 501c3 nonprofit organization based in Maryland. Although we represent the BioHealth Capital Region, we really work with companies anywhere from the United States or international companies. And we support many early to mid-stage BioHealth companies in terms of business development, commercialization, and more. But for the purposes of today's conversation, I'll focus on how we support them through their non-dilutive funding applications.
Super. So now moving to that, and there are many different types of non-dilutive funding, but for those of you who are new to the STTR SBIR process, the federal government mandated in 1982 that the larger agencies set aside significant dollars to help support R&D at early stage technology companies. Those of us working with biohealth technologies are usually talking about applications at NIH and NSF, the various institutes at NIH, sometimes DOD and others. The NIH alone in 2019 granted more than $500 million to 1,300 different companies around the United States. So it's a significant source of funding. And let's learn how our three CEOs have accessed it and what they've done. So Amir, can you tell us about your federal non-dilutive funding support, please? Sure.
So our primary federal funding came from the NSF SBIR Phase 1 program. We had several other grants from other nonprofits across the country, but that was the major grant money that came through from the federal government that really allowed us to de-risk and validate our technology. And what did it do? Did you use it for animal studies, prototype development, or? Sure. Yeah, so that was for advanced fine-tuning of our prototype, which now gets us to our current stage where we're preparing it for our regulatory testing going into our 510(k) submission. And the other aspect of that is before we're doing our official cadaver studies this year, with that grant funding, we were able to rent out operating room space at Johns Hopkins Hospital and then do cadaver studies there as well. So again, we did an extensive amount of testing that was really not possible. Go ahead. And that was from NSF, and the dollar amount again? NSF phase 1, which was 225,000.
Great, thank you. And Crystal, can you talk about I think you have had experience in 2 different companies.
Yes, I have. So I ran a company in Charlottesville called Tysis Diagnostics, and we raised nearly $7 million in non-dilutive government grant funding, primarily through the National Institutes of Health, SBIR program, but also we had at least one STTR program, as well as some funding through the National Science Foundation SBIR program. With my current company, Aperiomics, we are effectively a software company. So it's a little different. The amount of money we need isn't as big. So we've gotten money through the National Science Foundation to help build out this very advanced, very robust software system that we've built, but also to add more features to it. So when the idea was originally envisioned at George Washington University and Boston University, it was fairly limited, and it was from a research scope. So the NSF funding was able to allow us to further develop these pieces that our research founders had developed, and to really make it robust, to put quality systems around it, to make it appropriate for clinical use, which is a very different thing than research use. And with my current company, we've brought in about $1.8 million in NSF, and that's including an SBIR phase 1, a phase 1B, a phase 2, and a phase 2B.
And I think you might be the only company who this helped you get to commercialization. Is that correct?
Yes, so we've been on market with our technology for almost 3.5 years.
Great. So Anthony, you're on the way to commercialization. You've got some bigger hurdles with your therapeutic, but tell us a little bit about your experience with federal non-dilutive, please.
Sure. As we mentioned earlier on, I have been successful in getting non-dilutive funding for 2 companies I've worked with. So the first company was Memetis. We set up a company that was focused on predicting toxicity of drugs, specifically liver toxicity, which is really hard to predict in animal models. And we created a human liver on chip. We were able to get mostly SBIR money, 2 phase 1 SBIRs and 2 phase 2 SBIRs to support that development. And then we also got a local Maryland grant in partnership with a university that was a leader and a KOL professor in predicting liver toxicity. We were able to run assays with him through the MIPS program. Kind of validated our product outside of our hands, someone reproducing our data, which was really helpful. When we founded Miracule, we initially started applying for SBIR funding. So when our academic collaboration with the government, we developed the bioinformatics search algorithms that use genomics to identify therapeutic targets. We identified a target at head and neck cancer that we think underlies the cause of about half of head and neck cancer patients. And in about a third of head and neck cancer patients, loss of that gene is really determinant for their survival. And we also, in partnership with NIH, made a preliminary therapeutic. We were able to use that data with our preliminary target to apply for our phase 1 SBIR. In the phase 1, we optimized the therapeutic RNA, optimizing the chemistry, making a highly stable, more effective version of that. And we also generated more proof of concept data in animals with an already commercial delivery vehicle. Then we use that data to successfully win a phase 2. Right now, we're using that phase 2 grant to initiate our IND enabling studies so we can apply to FDA to bring the initial drug we discovered into human clinical studies. We were also successful in expanding our platform. We got a contract, an SBIR contract, which is very similar to an SBIR grant, to identify another target that we're developing now for coronavirus. And then we've also recently heard back we've potentially won a fast track SBIR for our first muscular dystrophy program. So we've successfully been able to build a strategy where we get initial data, win an SBIR, and then match that with dilutive funding from investors.
Great. Well, we'll come back to how key it is to include non-dilutive funding as part of a bigger business strategy. Each of you described activities supported by your federal funding, which really moved the ball, and in your case, two of you are moving the ball forward in terms of providing robust support and R&D and the type of proof of concept data that investors want to de-risk their potential investment in your companies. Anthony, you mentioned MIPS, and for those outside the BioHealth Capital Region, they may not know that's a state of Maryland program where a company gives $10,000 and the state will provide $90,000 to support a $100,000 project. Also, typically early R&D stage, it's been very successful in advancing technologies forward. Our partners across the way in Virginia have some similar programs at CIT, the Center for Innovative Technology, and different funds that we'll talk about later. But I wanted to bring Artie back into the conversation because similar to MIPS, yours is a state of Maryland funded, and you mentioned that with University Support Program that helps get early stage companies forward. So talk a little bit about its two phases, and we're focused on the grant, the non-dilutive, if you would please, the type of biohealth projects funded and how it makes a difference.
Sure. So the TEDCO itself has multiple funds that are state funded. Two of the bigger funds are non-dilutive, the Stem Cell Research Fund, which is specifically for regenerative medicine, as well as the MI fund, part of which is non-dilutive. And the rest of it is dilutive capital for investments in the startups that we create. The idea being that we have a pipeline of technologies that start out at the universities and federal labs in Maryland, and then we have different funds that can add capital as the company grows and allow for the company to grow and grow in Maryland. So we do a lot of support activities for that as well in partnership with BHI. The Maryland Innovation Initiative itself is a partnership with 5 of our regional universities. It's a pay-to-play. The universities put in X amount of dollars. The rest of it comes from the state. It's annually appropriated. And we use two ways of investing in companies. So first we do grants, which are the non-dilutive kind, to the PIs at the universities to de-risk a technology with commercial potential. So it could be an alpha product that needs, you have to create a beta product from it. It could be identifying lead compound. You may have a lead compound that you want to test in mice and animal models for dose and efficacy. So those are the kinds of de-risking projects that we would fund. And then we help them spin them out into startups. And then once we have the startups, we invest in those startups. So oftentimes we are the very first investment that goes into the company. It's as simple as a convertible note investment, and then we help the companies then grow and get follow-on investments. So in the 7 years that we have run this program, we have invested $38 million, created about 100 companies, 76 of which we have invested in. Some of them we didn't invest in because they came out of our program and were able to raise a larger round of sophisticated dollars that we didn't need to put in our smaller amounts in there. And then we help grow them to our mission is part economic development, part ROI. So we are looking to create jobs and grow the ecosystem in Maryland for startups. However, because we are also an investment fund, we look for ROI. So part of how we look for ROI, especially in the very early stages, is to look at what the companies can do to leverage non-dilutive funds to then go and raise dilutive capital. And our companies have been successful enough in raising a total of $445 million. That's almost $500 million of the $38 million that we invested. The leverage for non-dilutive capital is about 7x. and for dilutive capital is about 48x. So the companies were able to get the SBIRs and SSTRs right out of the gate as we put the investment dollars in, and then we helped them grow that into companies that were able to go then and get Series A, Series B dollars from, and 80% of those dollars come from not just regional but national VC groups. So that has been a huge success for us, but that required us to roll up our sleeves and work to leverage those non-dilutive capital to grow those companies.
So the leveraging of non-dilutive capital, I think, is what makes this this program and the work that the companies have described very cool. Rini, I'm going to get back to you in a minute, but let me ask Amir, Anthony, and Crystal if you could each describe how the federal funding that you just told us about has been incorporated into your longer-term business strategy, and how the investors that you've spoken with and/or are speaking to, I know some of you are raising dollars, view that in terms of de-risk. And Amir, why don't you start first?
Yeah, sure. Great question. So the strategy for us was to look at what is our timeline towards to market, and then define what aspects are really of the highest risk, where maybe some investors would be willing to invest in, but for the majority of investors, they see it as too risky. There's too many variables, especially with anything to do with life sciences and medical devices. That's the sentiment we received early on. So we did that gauging to understand at what stage would investors really be interested. And so we mapped out, okay, for the aspects that are really, really high risk that investors are not comfortable with, about the first 60, 70% of the technology development, 80%, we'll do everything with non-dilutive funding, raise it all that money through grants, de-risk the technology, and then now we're raising $1 million seed round. It's kind of a Series A to get us all the way through towards the 510K clearance and also potential exit. So that's how we mapped out. We have a somewhat short timeline for life science, about 3.5 years. So, I think we really planned the majority to be non-dilutive early on, so that we can de-risk it, and also for ourselves, to maximize the value for founders and early employees.
Gotcha. And what about you, Crystal?
So our strategy was similar, but a little bit different. Because again, we're effectively a software company, the capital needs that we have are not massive. So, and the timelines are also a lot shorter. So we were able to get to market in about 1.5 years after company inception. So that initial 1.5 years of non-dilutive funding that we started with was able to get us to market quickly. And so once we hit market, then we didn't really have as much need for the non-dilutive funding, and we wanted to stay focused on getting this into the commercial market and making advances there. So we were able to attract investors at an earlier life cycle stage of the company, and once we were on market, that obviously that's every investor's dream is having a company that's post-revenue. So while it hasn't been easy, it has been a fruitful strategy. We're raising our Series A right now. So it's certainly, this is not the ideal time in human history to be raising funds. However, I think there's really been no other point in human history where it's been more clear why infection testing is so important. So we're leveraging that.
That's true. You don't have to explain infection testing to anybody, I suspect, today, the way that it might have been one of your earlier slides back when. So
yes, there was a time when it wasn't quite clear why this was so important. It is now painfully clear to us all.
And I want you, before we get off near the end of this session, I know you also, Anthony mentioned working on COVID, and I know that you have COVID tests on the market, so we'll let you talk about that at the end. But Anthony, on the issue of non-dilutive funds and how you've woven that into your business strategy and the de-risking for investors. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I want to echo the comments of the previous two guests. You know, I think, you know, non-dilutive funds can't be all of it, but they can help you, you know, de-risk the most difficult parts of your technology when you're doing the more research end of it, which I think is a little more difficult for investors to support and to understand how likely you are to be successful. Also, they give you the staying power. You know, while you're executing the non-dilutive grant, you can be introducing your concept to investors, you know, talking to them over time. It took us 8 months to close our lead investor in our seed round. And I think really important to that was that we went out, we told them what our plan was when we first met it, and we were able to start executing on our plan with our non-dilutive funding. That gave us confidence in us as an organization, as you know, in our ability to execute, and that we understood our technology and how to develop it, which allowed us to close those investors. I think it also allowed us to build partnerships with BioHealth Innovation was really important in help introducing us to additional investors as we echoed out. So I think non-dilutive funding is a great way to get started, and it should be seen as part of the strategy. You know, that you know, you at least put it together on paper. We're going to do this and this and this. You won't follow that exactly, but it can be a key part of that and helping you leverage and build credibility and giving you the time to raise money to extend your business.
Thank you. So you all touched on the critical role that non-dilutive funding has played in advancing your technologies. I think that's part of why the leadership at BHI, long before I joined, created a federal funding support program where we help give hands-on support to companies. And Rini, why don't you tell us a little bit at a high level the different forms that type of grants consulting support takes?
Sure. Before I start, because we heard a lot about SBIR and STTR and the MIIs, I also wanted to just mention that there are many different sources of federal support. It can come from the DoD, the Air Force, with BARDA, and you know, with the current situation, we've helped a lot of companies with their COVID-19 specific grants as well, whether it's therapeutics or diagnostics. So the way we help companies, it depends on what they need and what type of support they would need. So what Judy mentioned was the Federal Funding Assistance Program, and that is a more high-level grant strategy and review and editing program. And we support them especially when they have their own in-house capabilities to write a grant, or they have had prior experience with applying for grants. So that would require maybe 10 to 20 hours per application. So it's more high level and more grant strategy. But for someone who might not have any experience, or they just don't have the bandwidth to conduct grant writing in-house, we have another program which is more in-depth, and we can teach you how to get started, and we help you from a grants management perspective of how to make sure that your application proceeds smoothly and how you can progress in preparing to apply. We also help with grant writing if that's something that you might need help with. So it really depends on how we can support you and at which time we can come in and support you.
And I guess I should say there are many companies around the country that provide grant writing support. Most of them are for profit, and some of them are huge, a lot bigger than BHI, but they we're, because of our economic development mission and our smaller size, we're a little bit more affordable, and particularly on the front end for that type of support. Amir, Anthony, and Chris, I'll just go down the road. Did any of you use grant writing consultants or attend workshops? So do a quick plug. BHI puts on a workshop where we have the program managers from each of the institutes speak. The last time it had been also with one-on-one physical partnering. We'll be setting that up digitally in the near future. Stay tuned. But Amir, did you use, yes, you did actually, grant writing support, come to think of it. Yep. You want to say how that was helpful if it was?
Yeah, we went to, yeah, certainly. So we went to several workshops for the SBR program, but we also were lucky enough to use the BHI grant support program. So we worked with a consultant that has submitted and helped many companies go through the SBIR program for both NSF and NIH. And so that consultant was Emma Bigelow through BHI, and she was instrumental in making sure we had a really strong grant application that showed in the reviews and the funding.
And Anthony.
Yeah, we also worked with the BHI Assistance Program. We worked with both Elizabeth Smith on one of our grants that we won, and also Fang Tao on another grant that we won. And that was really helpful for getting kind of outside feedback, shaping the message, improving the editing and the language. I think it really helped us win successful proposals. And I think the other thing that we did is myself and some of the other members of our team participated in grant review as we were learning to write grants. And that was actually really critical in understanding how to craft the message, what reviewers are going to find important when they're reviewing your proposals.
And what are the requirements to become what you're talking about is a grant reviewer, peer reviewer? So can anybody seeking an SBIR do that, or do you have to have certain requirements to get into that pool of reviewers?
I mean, I've never heard of someone being rejected. You have to send an application to the review officer with your CV, and I think as long as you have appropriate background knowledge of the area, you know, and some scientific credentials, I think that you would be. I think in general, someone who would be fit to be a PI on the proposal is probably fit to be a reviewer as well.
Interesting. Thank you. And Crystal, I think you did a lot of this work yourself back when. Tell us about how you did your grants.
Well, actually, there were kind of layers to this. So I have really strong academic founders that carried the heavy lifting in those initial applications. So those initial applications were heavily done by my team. I did attend CIT's SBIR workshops. I think I attended 2 of those. Which was really helpful in helping understand not just how to write a good proposal, but also what to do once you get the proposal. You know, how to manage the grant, how to, you know, be a good steward of federal dollars. The other thing, I also am a regular reviewer for NIH SBIR grants. So, and I'm called in. I have a unique background where I have both the executive expertise on the business side, but I also have, you know, strong credentials in infectious disease. So I'm frequently called on by NIH to do SBIR small business grant reviews.
That's interesting. So 2 of our 3 recipients have done reviews on obviously non-conflicting technologies. So did any of you participate? For those who are unaware, NIH, particularly over the past few years, has added support in the terms of they will send phase 1 awardees to I-Corps for customer discovery activity. There's commercial assistance provided to phase 2 awardees, separate from BHI or any for-profit. The federal funders are providing technical assistance and support. Did any of the 3 companies, did you participate in any of those, Amir?
My company.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Crystal.
Go, Crystal.
Sorry, So my founders of my current company, Aperiomics, they participated in an NSF I-Corps program. And that was really key for them as academic founders to understand the business side of things. And that was really the point where they realized that they, as professors, didn't really have an interest in building a company. So that was when they began recruiting for someone and were able to find me.
So we know it's a good program. And how about you, Amir?
Yeah, we also did kind of 2 rounds of the I-Corps program. I think the recent rounds of the NSF SBIR program, they actually it's optional, but it's pretty strongly recommended. So we kind of did our first round. We spoke to 100 spine surgeons after that. There's another 40 spine surgeons and value analysis committees. So getting that type of N on customer discovery really allowed us, now that we're in our commercialization phase, raising money, to have confidence to know we actually do know that this is a tremendous unmet need. So as people with more of an academic background, that definitely helped us be objective in defining the right problem.
Great. And Anthony, have you or your team participated?
Yes, we participated in NIH's ICOR program, which was part of our phase 1 SBIR. They actually awarded us $30,000 on top of our award. Well, $20,000 for the program and then $30,000 for the company to participate. So it allowed us, our team, to really focus on that activity for the couple months we were involved in it. We talked to 50,000 physicians who treat head and neck cancer, 50 physicians who treat head and neck cancer, and a number of other people were on our commercialization plan. It really helped us sharpen the message, I think, as we had to just over and over tell the story. It also helped us, zero in on our commercialization plan, talking to CMOs, CROs that are going to help us along the process. Started getting quotes, vetting different vendors, meeting consultants, things like that. So it was a really great program for us as well.
So that's a lot of times when we're talking federal funding, non-dilutive funding, people are thinking about the grant, the project-based work, but there's this extra support that I think many people don't realize that also helps move the technology forward and de-risk it. And you've all talked about the impact on the commercialization program. Artie, I know TEDCO at one point did an ICOR for its companies. Are you, does that still happen, or real quickly, anything related to from a Maryland State and TEDCO funding?
Yes, ICOR is a big part of all of our funding and our support activities. Our partner universities have their own ICOR program. So Hopkins has its own ICOR program, and so does University of Maryland. That is part of the ICOR chapter. Our grant portion, when we give out grants, we actually set aside $15,000 of that grant for commercialization and business plan development, which is, and part of which can be used to fund your ICOR team to travel and to go to these ICOR meetings, etc. So we actually encourage a lot of the ICOR activities as part of our grants. We have found that the teams that go through ICOR fare much better than teams that do not. The ICOR, if a team has gone through ICOR, they have a better understanding of their market size, market space, their customers, and have a better business plan when they, and a business model when they come in for our investment dollars. So we highly encourage that, and we have our own ICOR programs we do it for. So because TEDCO serves all of Maryland, we have a lot of companies in the rural areas. So we have virtual ICORs as well. So we have been working with the National ICOR team to create virtual ICOR programs. We initiate that. There's one cycle happening currently, and we do that, I think, twice a year. We run the rural or / virtual ICOR program for our portfolio companies. So we do a lot of that work, and we highly encourage companies to not just go after the non-dilutive funding, but also do an ICOR as well, to start leverage all of the resources to get to a point where you can, raise dollars for your inflection points.
Well, that's and we have, someone has a canine who also is in favor of ICOR. We heard quite the testimonial in terms of making a difference. A common theme that I'm hearing is it's how the academic collaborators or co-founders or founders think more from a business strategy, the business ROI, as you're pushing technologies forward. Rainey, when you're providing grant support, are there any particular areas where you find companies can most benefit from it? Are there certain challenges that you've seen just from looking at the entries in?
Right. So just to continue on the ICOR story just a little bit, to add on to that, many of times when you apply for an SBIR or any other grants, there is an allocation that you can request for for technical business assistance, or even in the NSF now, there is a $10,000 amount that you can request for to do a mini I-Corps. So I think it's very good information for people who are applying to an SBIR to know that you can request for additional funds to help with your commercialization or business development aspects, or to help with grant consultants like BHI. In terms of challenges, we really see companies at all different stages, and each of them carry their own unique challenges. I think one of the main challenges that has been mentioned today is commercialization and the business aspect. A lot of companies at the early stage are really strong in their science, and that is great, but a lot of them might not have the business experience or commercialization. And to write, for example, the commercialization part of a grant might be quite challenging. So that is one aspect that BHI can help with them. We can write it from scratch, or we can provide assistance to write a commercialization plan that would fit your application the best.
And thank you, Rini. So and I guess you do a good job, because your win rate is twice the national average when we look at SBIR as TTRs. So back to our companies, Crystal, what was the biggest challenge as you were applying for non-dilutive funding? And I guess, what do you wish you had known before you started that process? And I'll also ask Amir and Anthony the same question.
Sure. I think the biggest thing to keep in mind is that it's not free money. It's non-dilutive, but it's not free. It takes a tremendous amount of time to write a really strong proposal, and then the process of going through grant reviews and revisions, and even just the mechanics of getting the funds accessible is not a short process. So make sure you keep in mind that this is not a quick check write that comes in to support your company, but it really does take a significant amount of time and perseverance, and then at the end of it, oversight. Once you get the money, that's great, but then you have to actually provide appropriate oversight so that you're spending the dollars as agreed.
We've had a number of companies reach out to us for support on how to manage the grant drawdowns and the accounting for it. And so apart from the time that we've spent most of our discussion on applying for and using it, there is some back-end office operation savvy that comes into play if you're a first-time awardee, I think. Amir, do you want to address that and from your perspective?
Yeah, certainly. So for us, it's really two things. One, just to piggyback off what you just said, Judy, was you get the money, everyone celebrates, and then they give you about 105 rules for how you have to manage the funding. So things get tense pretty quickly. But really, the main challenge that we were trying to overcome for a long time is trying to plan kind of near and long term at the same time. So your grant timeline can be considered for most grants more in the near term, but how you are staging those grants, how you are planning for how to achieve up to a 12-month runway or more, that takes a little bit more long-term planning and more staging out of what each grant is accomplishing and how that's all leading to the commercialization, as opposed to just several grants for different ideas or different aspects of the technology out of sequence. So I think that really helps not only for grant management, but for getting towards your commercial path.
And thank you, Amir. Anthony, I know you have some thoughts. You've done this with two different companies as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think early on, coming out of academia, when I started writing SBIR grants, I wrote them very much more like a research grant, where we were just focusing on the technology part, the initial scientific steps we were trying to overcome, and we weren't successful at first. And I think working with the consultants to understand better how to format, organize the proposal, we refocused the proposals a little more on what we thought the technology would solve for problems in the marketplace, and that has made us a lot more successful in winning grants. So understanding how your innovation, SBIR is an innovation grant, is going to solve a problem in the marketplace, and then and then linking that hypothesis back to the experiments you're doing and the development you're doing in the proposal really helps, I think, the reviewers understand what your technology you're developing is going to be used for and do, and that really helps, I think, with winning those grants. The other thing is, putting that funding in a context. You don't want to get myopically focused on executing the grant. The grant should be a piece of the puzzle for building your company, and making sure you leave it at that and don't get too involved in the reporting requirements and all of the things around that. I think a lot of companies that are successful early on winning non-dilutive funding can get caught in a trap where they're spending too much effort chasing more non-dilutive funding and executing the grants rather than focusing on their product development. So that's kind of the balance with non-dilutive funding that a company has to achieve.
Staying true to the plan and doing things in parallel tracks is some of what I'm hearing. And Artie, you're working, but just by definition, frequently you're working with faculty innovators. So this pivot to commercialization focus and ROI that you've heard our CEOs describe, how have you found that in terms of a challenge and the biggest need for coaching or other support within your program?
So that is a huge part of our program and a huge issue, right? So we have scientist founders who are very technically strong, but it's getting them to the point where they're talking more on the commercial side of things, to transition them from science to the commercial commercial side of the business is a challenge for us. And one of the ways we approach that is we have what we call site miners. These are folks that are hired as part of our program. They mine the various sites for technology that is commercially ready. But part of their job is also to work with the scientists to help them understand what commercialization means, teaching them the language of commercialization, which is it's a whole different language compared to just plain grant writing for R1, for example. So understanding what the commercialization plan is, what does that mean? How do you work through the different steps? What are your inflection points? How do you then allocate capital for those inflection points and plan for what your capital needs are going to be? And how do you then work your way back to where it would be most useful to bring in non-dilutive dollars like SBIRs or MI grants, and then what you would need to achieve to then go and raise money from angels and VCs. So those are all questions that our site miners help them with, as do our partners, the university partners and their tech venture groups help those the scientists to overcome some of those hurdles. On our end, we do the similar work. We sort of augment that with workshops. We work with partners. For example, for devices, we work with AdvaMed. We help them attend conferences. We bring in speakers. We connect them to resources and C-level executives that might help them shape that narrative and come up with a plan. All of that is part of our gateway services that we offer as part of our grants and investments. So we sort of bolster our investment dollars with a lot of assistance, and that's not just for the MI program. We do that across the board for all Maryland startup companies.
Great. Well, that's one of the things as we're getting closer to the close here. One of the many resources for companies in Maryland, part of the BioHealth Capital Region. I know that, Crystal, you accessed some Virginia funds at one point. Let's talk real briefly about non-dilutive funds apart from SBI or STTR that maybe each of you were able to access. And Crystal, I'll let you start.
Sure. And we also, and actually in both my companies, we took part in a number of programs sponsored through the Center for Innovative Technology. They have programs that are commercialization driven, so they're SBIR matching programs to help give additional dollars to companies to get technologies in the Commonwealth commercialized. There's also the grant writing workshops, which we talked about earlier, and then there's a BioLife Gap Fund, which is an investment arm. So my first company was a portfolio company of that program. So there's a number of opportunities in Virginia that are state sponsored to help provide additional support to companies, especially companies that are using SBIRs as a commercialization tool.
Great. And before I forget, Montgomery County, Maryland. So Crystal's talking about Virginia, which has many resources to support companies. So does the state of Maryland, as already mentioned. Montgomery County is the only county in the state, in the country, Montgomery County, Maryland, with an SBIR match. Anthony, I think you had the opportunity to access that. Tell us a little bit about that. And then separately, if you've taken advantage of any other separate non-dilutive funding, please.
Yeah. So we were lucky enough to win 2 matches to our SBIR. So we matched at phase 2 at Memetis for $75,000. And then we matched our phase 1 for $25,000. So the way the program works is they let the SBIR program decide whether the grant is scientifically valid. And the great thing about the program, as Crystal mentioned, there's a million rules around what you can use SBIR funds for, and one of the things, you can't use them for IP prosecution, things like that. We were able to use that funding to help us file an additional patent and pay for prosecution for our first patent in Europe. So that was particularly useful and did something that was obviously value creating and critical for the company. In addition to our SBIR funding, we've also won 2 grants for non-for-profits that are interested in the diseases we're working on, head and neck cancer and muscular dystrophy. And that funding has been critical, initial seed funding for starting programs. One was for $75,000, one for $100,000. And in addition, when you get that funding from a non-for-profit, I think we got more publicity out of that than any other grant I've ever received. And they've been critical with linking us to KOLs associated with the non-for-profit, building out our scientific advisory team, clinical plans, et cetera. So I think there's benefits from looking for money from non-for-profits well beyond the funding itself.
Very good point. But were those 2 the grants, were they project milestone based or unencumbered in terms of the use from the
project milestone based? They do want to know what you're using the money for, and they supplemented the work we were doing in our SBIRs and in an important way, I think. But yeah, they want them to be used for personnel and for research and development, similar to an SBIR. I mean, you could propose for other things and they may consider funding. The ones that we won were research focused. I mean, there's so many different types of grants from not-for-profits.
And how about you, Amir? Thank you, Anthony.
I can speak to how the biohealth capital region location kind of really helped us throughout the funding and also just commercialization process.
Sure.
I would say definitely the proximity to a lot of these agencies was major for us. So in the early stages, we were able to validate our FDA pathway by actually having a meeting at the FDA with the medical device group. So that was really helpful to us. In addition, having a close proximity to so many nonprofits and kind of economic development organizations like TEDCO, the ABLE Foundation, groups like that really allowed us to have the support we need to develop our technology and prepare for commercialization.
Great, and I think you did receive some non-dilutive funding from someone other than our federal friends at NSF or NIH. Can you talk about that?
Yes, there was, yeah, so we had some significant support from the ABLE Foundation through their fellowship program, in which they're supporting essentially early stage ventures or late stage projects out of Hopkins that are looking to do a startup. So we were one of 4 that were picked that year, and that really helped us early on when we're still preparing the grant applications to essentially have a fellowship stipend and be able to use that for operations, things like that. In addition, we got support from a nonprofit in the Northeast called VentureWell, and they've been tremendous not only in the early grant stages in the small amount of money they provide, but also workshops, then getting to an investor readiness workshop, which we got selected for, and then now they're actually part of our investment round as well. So there was a nice continuum from the early stages of these supporters to now being involved in our round.
Well, I think that's it's good to keep in mind that non-dilutive funding support comes in all stripes and colors. So support for fellows, support public, promotion, KOLs, as Anthony was saying. Anthony and Crystal, have you benefited from being located in the biohealth capital region, Maryland, DC, and Virginia? And if so, at a high level? Obviously, you've both chosen to start your companies and grow jobs here, for which we are grateful. Crystal, what are your thoughts?
Absolutely. Being in close proximity to the alphabet soup here is key. We've done a lot of collaborative work with NIST on creating standards for infection testing with what we're doing. So that's been really, really important. We've also had a lot of support from our local county. So our local county provided some support, non-dilutive support, to help us build out our own space here in Loudoun County. So there's a lot of opportunities out there. Sometimes they're not widely advertised opportunities, but having really strong connections with the continuum of economic development is always a good thing.
Great. Anthony?
Yeah, I mean, definitely our technology spun out of NIH. We've had KOLs and partners at all the local institutions, Johns Hopkins and University of Maryland collaborations, critical, able to get feedback from FDA. We went to meetings with FDA directly, got to, met with FDA faculty. It's just so much easier being local to do that. So definitely a number of critical things. And I do want to give another plug to BHI. They were critical when we first start up the company, training me as an entrepreneur and helping connect us along our path. So I think we couldn't have done that in another area of the country. And I also want to say, I think from personnel perspective, I have colleagues in Boston, in San Francisco, and I think we have a little bit easier time recruiting in the area as an early stage company. Not as much competition, lower price point for staff, and a lot of good qualified postdocs and other staff in the area that have been critical for us growing.
So we have the most highly educated workforce here in the region, and the salaries are high, but they are significantly lower than those a company would be paying in San Francisco or Boston. And our lab space is more affordable. So with many opportunities for collaboration. Well, we're about to wrap it up here, so I'm going to go around and ask each of you what your top priority is now for the next 3 months, next 12 months, knowing that we're in extremely changing dynamic times. And for our 3 companies, if you are raising funds, please include in that what you are seeking and how those funds would be used. But first I'll go to Rini. Rini, what are you working on near term and over the next year? What are your top priorities?
So we will not stop helping early stage to mid stage companies. We help anyone who needs help, really, as part of our economic development mission. We also provide free EIR sessions, where we have our entrepreneurs and residents come sit in a room and help you with any advice you might need. So that is something we offer to anyone inside and outside the biohealth capital region. Moving beyond this situation with the virus, we continue to help companies with advancing the technologies through non-dilutive or dilutive funding, and in any way we can help them.
Great, thank you. Artie, what are you working on these days, near term and for the next few months?
So the near term, we are trying to manage a lot of our programs and portfolio companies that are struggling because of lab closures, as well as issues with manufacturing and supply. supplies that they needed from not just outside of this region, but outside of the country. So we're trying to help them navigate those issues. But in the long term, there's a lot of opportunity here. A lot of our faculty members have ideas and have already developed various technologies to combat not just COVID, but also other infectious disease pandemic issues that we may be facing in the future. So we want to start working on those and try and encourage those technologies moving forward. So we are looking at funding some of those new ideas and technologies, including digital health and telemedicine that may come through from our surgeons and our physicians in the different university hospitals. So we're trying to move those along. So it's going to be a changing, there's a change in the kind of technologies that we would have invested in the past versus in the future now. And so we are going to look at what the leading edge of the wave looks like, and then work our way back to the early stage technologies and prepare them for that.
That makes sense. Amir, what are your top priorities?
Yes, so our top priority for 2020 is to submit our 510K application to the FDA. There are a few parts of that, of course. Right now, our most immediate priority is to close our Series Seed round. That allows us to get through to clearance. Happy to say that we're looking to close by the end of this month in June. So we've had strong support from our recent lead investor and are now going through the whole syndication process. So that's our immediate goal. And really during the middle of this, the summer, it's to finalize our validation testing for the 510K and the commercialization.
Well, that's a significant move forward, and I know you'll be partnering here at Resi. So get your dollars in if that closes coming up so soon. Good luck to you, Anthony.
Yeah, again, I think our biggest challenge and our biggest thing is to use the money we've raised already, meet milestones around regulatory approval, like getting towards our IND, working with CMOs, and growing our company effectively, like picking the right people, organizing them correctly. I think that's one of the most critical things that a startup does is managing its growth appropriately, managing its funding appropriately. And then we are also looking for additional funding that will help us propel even farther from the objectives we have right now. And we have some great leads, and we hope to make more of those at the conference coming up with Resi.
Great, and before it popped to you, Crystal, I neglected to mention one of many resources, but it's also fairly unique. It happens to be on the Maryland side of the river in the BioHealth Capital Region, is a 50% angel investor tax credit. So luckily, Crystal is commercializing and selling, and we're gonna help you with sales, Crystal. Those seeking investment in Maryland, if you're an investor in or outside Maryland and you were to put $50,000 or $500,000 into Spine-Align or Miracule, you would be able to receive half of that money back as a Maryland Biotechnology Investor Incentive Tax Credit. A little plug for that state program. They don't know that I'm doing that. But Crystal, thanks, and Anthony, you're making me think of that because I think you've participated in that in the past. Crystal, so what are your top priorities? And tell us both with your current sales, COVID, and investment that you're seeking.
Sure. So obviously, being an infection testing company focused on changing the way infections are identified, we made a temporary pivot to offer COVID viral testing and also COVID antibody testing to support the public health needs of our country and our region in crisis. We are also supporting companies now. Now that groups are starting to reopen, we're focused on helping employers screen for COVID, screen their staff. So we're doing employee screening for COVID, both virus and antibodies. And then next week we're doing a big public health testing event where we're hoping to get about 2,500 people tested for COVID. So obviously that's the elephant in the room and where we spend most of our energies. That said, before the pandemic struck, I was fundraising, and I'm still fundraising. So despite the economic challenges everyone's seeing right now, I've closed a significant amount of the funds that I have available. So I'm looking for an additional about $1 million to get the round closed out. So that's a big part of what we're doing. And then as far as business as usual, we still run our core technology every day. We're still working with our healthcare providers all over the world to help patients that are sick and no one can figure out why. And our big goal for the upcoming year is to get some positive decisions on insurance coverage so that our testing can be integrated into more broad stream acceptance. Right now, most of our patients end up paying out of pocket for our testing.
And I want people to be able to reach each of you, whether it's an employer seeking COVID testing or someone wanting to invest in your firm or Miracule or Spinalign. So as we wrap this up, I'm going to ask each of you to give your company, your name again, your company, and your URL. This will be available on the Resi site, but in case you've seen this video at a time that you don't have access to that site, I want to make sure everybody can reach you. Before I do that, I want to thank all of our panelists for their time. They all are working as our friends at Bio say to help fuel, feed, and heal the world. You may be using a therapeutic from Anthony's company, a tool in spinal surgery from Amir's company, a test for COVID or something else from Crystal's company, and Rini and Artie are working with technologies that all across the spectrum that we know might be helping you and me. So without further ado, Crystal, name, company, and URL. How can people find you?
Sure. Crystal Eisenhower. Our office number is 703-229-0406, and all my staff are amazing and can help anyone with any questions. Our URL is APERIOMICS.com.
Thank you. Anthony? Anthony may be frozen. Amir, Anthony, there you go. Amir.
Sure. So I'm Amir Sultanian, CEO and co-founder of Spinalign. Our URL is pretty simple. It's spinealignsurgical.com, and my cell phone is 818-300-9704. Thanks again.
Talk about responsive, putting your cell phone number out there. Remember, he's on the East Coast. Anthony.
Hi, Anthony, we can edit this little bit out, but you are on mute. There you go.
Sorry about that.
No worries.
My name is Anthony Saleh. I'm co-founder and CEO of Miracule. Our website is our company name, www.miracule.com. My email address is anthony@miracule.com, and I look forward to hearing from people interested in talking with us.
Thank you. Artie.
Hi, my name is Artie Santhanam, and our company URL is tedcomd.com/MRI. The MI stands for Maryland Innovation Initiative, which is a program I run.
Thank you. Rini.
My name is Rini Peck, and our URL is www.biohealthinnovation.org. Thank you.
Great. And this is Judy Costello on behalf of BioHealth Innovation, the BioHealth Capital Region. We can be reached at the URL Rini just mentioned. You can reach me by email, jcostello, COSTELLO @biohealthinnovation.org. Once again, a big thank you to our panelists and wishing you all viewers prosperity and good health. Stay safe. Thank you.